Hey, buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and these are the most overrated cards from the Boomsday Project. And these aren't cards that I just overrated myself, these are actually cards that the community at large overrated. And you might be wondering how I determined that. Well, I did two things. First, I went and looked at the Vicious Syndicate pre-release poll where they asked tons of people to rate cards from 1 to 5 stars, and I ranked those cards from best to worst. And then I compared that to the played rates for cards in the Boomsday Project over a pretty recent period to see which cards are seeing play now that the meta has started to settle and refine itself a little bit, and then essentially ranked all those cards and compared the numbers. So for instance, if a card was ranked as the best card in the expansion by the community, but it's only being played the 100th most of the entire expansion, that would be an incredibly overrated card. People thought it was going to be the best. In reality, it's not very good at all. So I took the 5 cards that had the biggest difference on those lists, and those are the 5 most overrated. Now, I should note, this does not necessarily mean these cards are fundamentally terrible. They might be good someday. Just right now, they're not seeing play. It's not necessarily a fundamental attribute of the card that's the problem. It might be the meta or a deck that hasn't showed up or a combo that hasn't presented itself. So I'm not condemning these cards to failure. I don't think it works that way. But at the moment, they are underperforming based on expectations in the current Boomsday Project meta. That said, let's go ahead and jump into this list, the 5 most overrated cards. Up first here at the number 5 spot, we have Shaman's Eureka. And this was ranked in the 63rd spot by the Hearthstone community, so basically in the top half of all Boomsday cards, but it's only seeing play at the 115th most played card. So basically the very, very bottom of the barrel. This thing is not being tested, explored, experimented with hardly at all. Virtually no one is playing Eureka, which still kind of surprises me, to be honest, because clearly this looks like it could build some sort of interesting, cool combo, summoning a minion from your hand, maybe like a Malagos, for instance. Who knows what else might exist out there. But at the moment, people just have not found a deck to make that work. Again, that doesn't mean this card's an utter failure necessarily. It might still pop up from time to time. Now, I gave this card 3 stars. I think that's honestly still fairly in line. It looks like a 2-star card right now, but my ratings are talking more about like the fundamental application of a card. And frankly, it could still be a 3-star card someday. I don't think it'll ever be a tier 1 deck card, but I do think this might still see some play in a deck here or there eventually by the time it leaves standard format. We'll see, because for right now, this thing is just very, very, very unplayed, and that's not typically a good sign. So I may have overrated this one myself, even at 3 stars. Currently, at the moment, I certainly have, although the Hearthstone community probably overrated it even a little bit more, even though they didn't really suggest this would be a dominating card at the 63rd spot, still being played way less than I think anyone actually imagined. So now let's move on to the number 4 spot here with Crystallizer. And this was ranked as the 14th best card of the expansion. So people put this one pretty high up there. I think in particular, people imagined it would be run in a heal zoo deck where taking damage is value because you can then heal and make all kinds of crazy tempo plays. But in reality, this is only being played the 66th most of all Boomsday cards, so not even in the top half. And for the record, when it comes to played rate on these cards, really only, the top 30 or 40 cards are seeing much play at all in the Boomsday Project. So being at 66 is actually pretty bad. This one's not seeing a lot of play. I've actually seen it popping up maybe just a little bit here and there. I think I've seen it played 1 time since I ran these numbers, so maybe it's gaining a little ground, but really still not being played. It's underperforming based on expectations. That's namely, I think, because right now Heal Zoo doesn't need a tool like this. It's not creating enough pressure, and they have plenty of ways to activate their own self-damage with better cards that play more into a Zoo mindset. So beyond that, maybe Warrior could use this or a couple other fringe applications, but nobody is doing it right now. Ultimately, I think there are better 1/3s in most classes that would want to utilize something like Crystallizer, so it's just not making the cut on lists. Not necessarily terrible looking card at a base level, it does some cool stuff, but just not good enough compared to other options. Now, I gave this card 3 stars. I think I got a lot closer to where this one's at. This one I think we got pretty right. A lot of people would put this in the 4-star range. I think some people even would put it in the 5-star range, given that it's the 14th highest card in the set. I think 3 stars is right for this card. Maybe still a 2-star card at this point in the meta, but 3 stars being somewhere right near the middle of the expansion feels pretty good. So I think I got this one right and understood it had some limitations and wouldn't necessarily have a competitive edge over other cards. So I don't think I actually underrated this one. I occasionally get things a little bit right here and there. So moving on to the number 3 spot here, we have Warrior's legendary spell, the Boom Ship. And this one came in at the 21st spot for rankings, but fell to the 76th spot when it comes to actual played rate. So a huge decline there, and certainly a card here that I overrated as well. I thought the Boom Ship would make the cut in Warrior. I thought there'd be a list where this made a lot of sense. And for the record, this card has seen some play testing here and there. I've seen some control/tempo warrior decks that summon a lot of big stuff and do neat things with it, thanks to the Boom Ship. I think we've even seen like Mechathune decks that have utilized this before. So there are neat ways to play this, but they have certainly not made a big impact on the meta at all. And this card is just not seeing much play. Again, at the 76th spot, it may not sound terrible. That's near the middle of the expansion. But frankly, cards that far down just aren't being played much at all. There aren't that many Boomsday cards making a huge impact on the game right now. So these are particularly dire, even at the middle of the expansion. And of course, I gave this 4 stars, which falls pretty in line with the Hearthstone community rankings. So I overrated this one pretty clearly. Again, I don't think that's necessarily a death knell for this card. I think it's strong enough and does a neat enough thing and fast enough and instant enough that it will eventually find a deck and it will make sense for Warrior. It just hasn't done so yet. It's not a good sign typically. That decreases the likelihood of success, but I still have faith in the Boom Ship. So overrated for now, but maybe not forever. Now moving on to the number 2 spot here, we have Necro Mechanic for Hunter. And this one was ranked 39th by the community, but fell to 103 for its played rate. So virtually unplayed at 103. Nobody is playing this card right now in the Boomsday Project seriously, but people put it in the top 3rd, or even really higher than the top 3rd of all expansion cards. So people had some fairly high hopes for Necro Mechanic. Now I think that's pretty clearly due to the success Death Rattle Hunter lists we're seeing at the time the expansion was being revealed. Death Rattle Hunter was very popular. This seemed to fall right in line with that strategy, and it looked like it made sense, almost like Spirit Singer Umbra with some additional stats. And, higher stats do matter in Hunter with things like Houndmaster Shaw. Just having a higher health total makes it harder to remove. So I think people were dreaming pretty big with this one, but ultimately 5 mana is still a fairly high price to pay. It's also a card you have to play first to activate, much like Umbra, which is sometimes harder because it costs a lot of mana to squeeze all that stuff out. Even like a Devil's Roar Egg in combo with this in a single turn is like 8 mana. That's just so prohibitive and expensive. So I give this thing 3 stars. I think that is still overrating it, frankly. This is definitely right now a 2-star card, getting close to even a 1-star card at the moment. So 3 stars is an overrating. I think the Hearthstone community probably overrated it a little bit more than me, just barely, but we were all wrong. And I don't really see a lot of hope for this one, to be honest with you. It seems like Death Rattle Hunter already makes a lot of sense, and there's just no room for a card like this. I think this one is actually doomed to be overrated forever. I'm not sure it's going to have a saving grace kind of moment. I think we just misread it and got hyped on what was around currently without really breaking down the costs and the order of play and the requirements for how awkward this one would be. Ultimately, that means I missed it on Necro Mechanic. Even though it may not look bad, because I only gave this 3 stars, that's still just wrong. It's not right, so I overrated it too. Maybe not terribly so, but I missed the mark on this one. And then finally, at the number 1 spot, the most overrated card in all of the Boomsday Project, and maybe not surprising, but also surprising and controversial, it is Juicy Psych Melon. I think it was perhaps the most hyped card of all of the Boomsday Project cards. Like on Reddit, people were blowing up and saying this card's crazy and it's going to break the game. And I think people were giving it 5-star status and best card in the game across the board. And so far in standard format, that has not been the case. People landed this at the number 7 spot on the Vicious Syndicate rankings. So one of the top 10 cards of the expansion. But it fell down to the 74th spot. So not even in the top half of play. Again, that's really bad in the Boomsday Project. This guy is not making an impact on any relevant meta Hearthstone deck in standard format. And I gave this card 4 stars as well because it is a sprint that tutors. And it just looks like ridiculous raw card draw efficiency in a single spell. And it's controllable, all of which sounds great. So 4 stars seemed a given. And I think some people criticize me for not giving it 5 stars. And basically this would be a 5-star card as far as the Hearthstone community is concerned, that highly ranked. But in reality, in standard format right now, this thing just doesn't line up or work or draw any cards that are all that relevant. So right now, it just doesn't look good in standard format. And to be totally honest with you, I'm not sure that's going to change. It might if select 7, 8, or 9 mana power cards come out, but it feels like we already have a lot of the combo stuff at these costs that could be necessary. You know, you've got like Malagos and Togwaggle and Ultimate Infestation and Azalina and all this stuff that seems like it would work, but those cards are being played anyway without Juicy Psych Melon. So I don't think that's a great sign for this card in standard format. Now, that said, you'll note I've been saying standard format a lot in this portion of the video, when I haven't said that at all previously. That's because Juicy Psych Melon in wild format is apparently a fantastic card and driving one of the best Druid combo decks in all the game, because beyond just Azalina and Togwaggle and all this stuff, if you add in Kuhn and Aviana and all these other crazy combo cards in wild, suddenly Juicy Psych Melon guarantees some absurd combo opportunities and therefore looks like a really, really strong card at a base raw level. So not overrated in context of wild, but I don't do wild. This is standard format. All of my stuff is standard format at a default. So sure, you can keep that in mind. You can debate and argue that the card is good because of that. That's fine. You're right. But all these ratings were standard format. People went into this expecting it to be good in standard format. So in my mind, still a highly overrated card. I missed the mark here too. 4 stars is way too good. This looks like a 2-star card right now at the moment. 4-star cards is 2 spots wrong there. The Hearthstone community perhaps got it even more wrong, but who cares? We were both off on Juicy Psych Melon. And so far it has simply failed. So undeniably an overrated card in standard format. We do this every expansion. We take something and we hype it to an absurd level and it just doesn't deliver. Juicy Psych Melon, the latest culprit in a long chain of that as far as the Hearthstone community is concerned. I fell for the bait a little bit too here. Keep an eye on it. It might be good someday, but right now it's just not making sense, and I frankly don't have a lot of hope that it ever will. So this might remain one of the most overrated cards of all time as far as I'm concerned. And there you go, guys. The 5 most overrated cards in the Boomsday Project. Now, again, first off, I didn't pick these cards. This is from data. So don't come to me and complain if you don't like the choices on this list. It's not my fault. It's just how things shook out. I'm just explaining perhaps the logic or observing why these might be on the list. I'm not saying anything about them from a value judgment standpoint, because I still do think a lot of these cards have a chance to be good, and we've seen that happen a lot. Cards that were terrible, something changes, the meta shifts, new cards come out, and cards become great. So they might be good someday. Right now, though, they are very overrated. That said, if you have decks that are using these successfully, if you think you've seen something nobody else has seen and there's a reason one of these cards is awesome, share that in the comments. I love to hear that stuff. That's going to be amazing to read. I can't wait. But until then, thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, game on.